Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Monday at about 9:46. Pretty nice day. I think it's supposed to be a pretty nice week. For the most part, pretty sunny. And this weekend was a pretty bad washout. It rained pretty heavily all Saturday and then also yesterday, which was Sunday. So today's show is a show I'm really excited about. And yesterday, and I've said before, when it's raining and just weather in general that makes you want to stay inside. What better way to put yourself in the mindset to sit around and watch a bunch of movies. And so it was yesterday was a perfect day for that. So I went with a friend, my friend Erin Kirkpatrick, who's a really great friend of mine. We have gone to lots of movies together. We went yesterday to Flagship Cinema in Waterville, Maine, which is about an hour from here, from where I live here in Northport. Maybe a little less, but about an hour. And we went to go see the new Martin Scorsese movie, Flowers, Killers of the Flower Moon. This was a movie I have been anticipating for a very long time. I had first heard about it like 2 years ago. So, and I've said, one of my gripes with this year, or I should say the last couple of years, but mainly this year, 2023, was I just found it harder to find any movies that I was really fired up to go see in the theater, taking that plunge, that financial plunge, and going to the theater and having that experience. You know, even that even that being said, I still really enjoy that experience. Even if I happen to go to a movie and it's like it's okay or it's not very good, it's still that experience I really love. And obviously, especially if it's a movie that is really good and is, captivating or at least really entertaining. So, and this year has been, I think, a really rough year with new releases. Just, being overwhelmed and I think inundated with the sheer amount of comic book movies that continue to come out. Other movies that were coming out were, I guess, okay. They looked pretty decent. But, and I try to be pretty positive about, when it comes to certain things around films, obviously, but then also the film business, film industry, and seeing, what theaters have gone through, because of the last few years and seeing how to a degree things have gotten much better and now the audience has more or less kind of come back to go to the movies, and it also ushered in when a lot of those things were happening in the height of that pretty awful situation where things were closed. It ushered in this whole kind of thing of what was already happening with streaming and people being able to watch movies at home and all those kinds of things. So with the emergence of with what COVID did, it just pushed in all it forced all those things to come uh, through fruition, like where it became suddenly streaming and using our electronic devices was our only means to really communicate or to see entertainment. So it really pushed in that whole kind of thing. And since then, it's been this slow kind of recovery to a degree, getting back to quote unquote normalcy, even though I think certain things will never be the same. Uh, so it's been a really wild ride, to say the least. And, I noticed the last couple of years, there were things that were coming out, movies that were coming out that I was very excited about. But then this year, especially this year, It was kind of a dismal period, kind of a dismal time. I watch movies probably more now than I ever have, and that's because I've been buying a lot of movies, and I've been seeing lots of newer movies, or I should say, seeing lots of movies I've never seen before, and so my appetite for film has grown even more. So it's an interesting, I don't know, kind of to a degree like I don't know, a weird balance. But I was really looking forward to seeing Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese is, without a doubt, one of the greatest directors ever. One of the the most important figures in the world of cinema and especially American cinema. Probably overall the most consistent filmmaker as far as just everything he does is pretty much golden. And it's really hard to find anything in his extensive career that is, a misfire. It really is. I think it's really, really hard to find anything. One movie I can think of that I was really on the fence about, and I wasn't, when I first saw it, I was, I didn't know what to really say. I didn't really know what to think. I liked parts of it, but then I was like, things might have, certain aspects of the film or the story kind of fell apart for me, and that was Shutter Island, which was one of many films, one of many collaborations that Martin Scorsese did with Leonardo DiCaprio. And that was my first reaction. I had a real mixed feeling. Every other Scorsese movie that I've seen, I just instantly fell in love with. And then about a year or two later, I came across Shutter Island, and Shutter Island is a very different film for him because it's pretty much a horror film in a lot of ways. It's a psychological horror, but it's kind of a horror movie. And the only other film that he's kind of done, and again, that's kind of my main love is the horror genre, obviously, and I do extensive coverage of horror films on Film Fanatic. The only other film that I consider that he did that's definitely a horror film or has horror aspects is the remake that he did with Cape Fear, Robert De Niro, and Jessica Lange, which is an amazing movie, Nick Nolte. And I definitely consider that to be a suspense driven horror film. And it's an amazing film. That had been the only movie that I was aware of that where he kind of ventured into that kind of dark horror territory. But Shutter Island is a little bit more of a fully realized kind of horror experience in a lot of ways. So when I first saw it, I had kind of this mixed reaction to it. I liked some of it, but then I thought it was a little bit of a misfire. I felt like a lot of it I didn't connect with, and then fast forward about a year or two after that, and I came across Shutter Island on DVD, and or actually I bought it. I bought it on Blu-ray a few years ago, actually, and because it's been out for quite a while, and I saw it on Blu-ray, and I snagged it up. It was really cheap, and I watched it, and I really liked it. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was super, almost psychedelic to a degree. The visually, it was amazing. I thought it was a little bit more suspenseful, and it had even more kind of these augmented horror elements in the story that I really liked. I really loved the ending too. It was a very dark film, and and, and now I really actually really I actually really love that movie quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. I've only seen Shutter Island like twice, but it was funny. I had this really different reaction when I saw it again. I think because I went in maybe with a certain or a real high level expectations or something, but that happens. And that happens a lot with films where and it happens. I see it happens a lot with bands and music. That happens to me a lot. Where I first discover a band or an album by a particular band or a movie, and my first reaction might be kind of lukewarm. It might be in the middle, or I might not really like it. And then maybe I revisit it at some point, and it just totally sings to me, and I'm just totally into it, and I'm like, wow, like okay, this is really resonating with me. Uh, and then I've had situations where vice versa, where bands and films that I've liked that I initially always thought I really liked, and then I there's some time goes by, and I re check or I check it out again, and then I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, what's going on here? And I really kind of fall apart from it. There's a band that I got into. Just two quick examples of that. There's a band I got into a few years ago called Whitechapel, and when I first heard them, I really liked them, and they're part of this whole kind of deathcore scene, which is kind of stupid, but I really liked them when I first heard them, and I remember playing some of their music for a friend who was into some of that music, and she didn't really like it. She was like, "It's too produced sounding. It was too like, um, there was too much of a shtick. It wasn't like it didn't feel like organic, it was overproduced, and she didn't like it because of that." And then I don't know. Fast forward a couple of years or two after that, I started. I hadn't listened to them for a while. I listened to them, and I just now I can't listen to them. I don't like them at all anymore. It's really weird, and so a very strange kind of thing. And now I don't consider my fan of consider myself a fan of that genre anymore, and I don't like that band anymore. Really weird. And one a movie example for me was a movie called The Cell with Jennifer Lopez and Vincent Gallo, and that movie was a movie where it's basically kind of told from this psychedelic uh, cinematic kind of perspective of a serial killer. Jennifer Lopez is in it, Vince Vaughn, and I remember seeing that movie in the theater, and I really liked it. And then I had seen it a couple other times after that, and then last year I bought it on Blu-ray, and I hadn't seen it in a couple years, and I watched it, and outside of the visual element of the film, some of the cinematography, I was like, what's going on here? And I just completely did not enjoy it at all. Like especially around the acting and the story and kind of it had cringeworthy moments. Really strange, really strange. So it's an interesting thing when that happens, and of course it's always a matter of taste. But the only movie that I've had a little bit of a reservation around it being really great in Scorsese's career is Shutter Island. But now I actually really think it's a fantastic movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. And so, and he just turned 80 years old. He has had a long partnership with Leonardo DiCaprio, who I think he's one of my favorite actors, and I think he's definitely one. And I think within the last, 20 years or whatnot, has definitely established himself as being one of the greatest actors of his generation. I mean, talk about versatile. And he's had this long collaboration uh, with Scorsese from like the Departed, The Aviator, Kings of New York, Shutter Island, and now with Killers of the Flower Moon. And I think I might be leaving out a film of his, but the track record that they work together. But the track record, the films, I mean, you have Casino, you have Mean Streets, which is my favorite Scorsese film of all time. Casino, the list is endless of so many great films that he directed. I really loved the last film that he did, The Irishman. And the list goes on. The Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, of course, King of Comedy. I mean, amazing. Just all incredible films. All his films tend to have this real grit to them. They're all pretty dark. They're really based, in this kind of gritty urban reality. They really examine the complex nature of humans and also, especially their our dark nature. A lot of his movies are pretty violent and pretty dark, and so I was very much anticipating seeing Killers of the Flower Moon, and I have to say it's kind of an amazing film. It is an amazing film. It's an amazing feat. It's definitely one of his most ambitious kind of epic films. It's pretty long. It's about 3.5 hours. It's close to 4 hours long. But again, we were talking about that, me and my friend Aaron, afterwards, about the length of the film. She felt that the film needed to have some kind of intermission. Which I can kind of see because it is a long movie, and I mean basically, it is your, you know, for instance, for us driving there, for both of us to get to this theater, this theater, and I'll get into this in a minute, but to this theater that we've been going there for a few movies, and I actually like this theater a lot. It's about an hour drive, so and so you're there for close to 4 hours, and then we got dinner afterwards, and then we came home. So it was like a long day. I mean, we were gone the entire day, and it was great. It was awesome. But when it came to the whole movie situation, when we were actually in the seats and the movie was starting and it was playing, with without getting around it, and there's no avoiding it. It's a commitment. I mean, your whole day or your entire night is gonna be watching that movie because it's a commitment. It's a fully involved experience, and it takes up a lot of time. And she was saying how it probably this film she thought it was a little too long and that it did need some kind of break or intermission. And and I kind of agree with that. There was a time like in the 50s and 60s where films did have long sweeping epic films, especially in the theater. They would have these intermissions. Certain films that I can remember that had that when they were in the theaters were films like, which this movie was very very much inspired by, but Rock Hudson and the Giant. That film, I believe, when it was shown in the theater, had a intermission in between because that's close in length. Another film that Scarface, I believe, was when that came out in the theaters, starring Al Pacino. That's a very long movie too. There was an intermission, um, and and I remember even as a kid seeing Scarface and a couple other films when seeing it like on HBO or something, where there would be a little bit of an intermission where you could take a break and then go to the bathroom or go get something to drink or whatever. And so I can understand that because it is long, but I, um, and but then I also said to her, well, making these giant, sweeping epics is not anything different really for Scorsese. I mean, especially films like Casino or Goodfellas. Those are huge spectacle films. Like you're following these characters over decades. And they're lengthwise they're extremely long. The Irishman is an incredibly long movie. I think that might even be a longer film than those two other films, but just about the same length. So he's definitely Taxi Driver's very lengthy. So is Raging Bull, but especially Casino and Irishman and Goodfellas. Those are huge epics, and so this film very much kind of sticks with that kind of tradition in his filmmaking style. I did not think it was too long. Really, I thought it was an incredible story, in the truest sense of the word, a true horror film. It's funny because I love horror films to death, and I, cover mostly horror based films, especially slasher films. And when I see a film like this, Killer of the Flowers Moon, Killer of the Killers of the Flower Moon, which is a work of nonfiction. And when I talk about a lot of the films I watch, which are pure fantasy, pure fiction, pure entertainment, really, in a lot of ways. The levity for watching something like this, where, this is a true horror film. This is really a film that is really spine tingling and something that strikes this nerve that is truly frightening. That when you see that, the human animal is, and what they're capable of doing to their fellow humans, for reasons of just wanting to acquire wealth, is just astounding. And to me, these movies, a movie like this is way more frightening than watching, say, Friday the 13th or Halloween. Like, no, this is actually scary in a lot of ways because of the realistic, or because of the nature of that. These are all documented. Um, this is a documented situation that happened in real life. And the story itself is, it's basically about. It takes place in the 1920s, and it's basically centered on the Osage Native American tribe, which was based in Oklahoma. They they were a community of Native Americans, a reservation that struck oil, and so they became one of the wealthiest communities in the country, and so whites moved in to kind of basically work their way into the system and try to infiltrate, and where men were marrying women who were on the reservation. And it is such a harrowing tale of how deceitful and disgusting human beings are in a lot of ways, and also the total sociopathic lack of empathy that people had towards, basically being, you have this whole town that is responsible for, I mean, countless amounts of death, where there's no, absolutely no empathy, no remorse, and no, a complete portrayal of this whole town of where essentially they're uh, sociopathic. There's no emotional resonance with what these crimes are that they're committing in the name of power, and it's pretty unbelievable. Almost to the point of like you know taking someone's life is like, more or less taking out the trash. Um, it has that much of an emotional um, barometer to it, if you will. The cast, I mean, the cast is amazing. I mean, Martin Scorsese, his long history with Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro, I think this is one of his best roles, a really unique role. He's been on an incredible tear lately, I think, with his role in The Joker, where he really, for years, he was kind of in this space of where he became a parody of himself. And now, for whatever reason, and he's getting up there in age, but he is. I noticed it also in the last Scorsese movie, The Irishman. He plays a very complex character and gets away from using the same kind of De Niro tropes that we all like and we all love, but also are very sick and tired of seeing and hearing. He kind of casts all that aside and really dives into just being a really amazing actor. When he was young, he was regarded as one of the best of his generation, if not the best. Like right up there with like Marlon Brando, so or James Dean. So it's pretty, it's phenomenal and inspiring to see where he is, and with his age, and to see that he's got this fire again. He's just phenomenal. He plays such an incredibly complex role. Leonardo DiCaprio, again, amazing, just an amazing performance. Such a nuanced character he plays with so many different layers, and you're in some ways you're kind of you really have empathy towards him, and you almost kind of like him, and then you're also feeling like this guy is such a vile, disgusting human being. So there's all of these kinds of, nuances and all of these little flourishes that make his character really interesting. A really unique character. And again, DiCaprio's got such an amazing track record with acting. Then this is one of his best roles, I think. I mean, such a complex character, and how he pulled this off, and how to, where you can have these subtle little nuances is pretty staggering. And Lily Gladstone, who is an actress I've never seen before, is pretty amazing in this film. She's kind of, in some ways, she plays this very quiet, subtle character, but with actually not a whole lot of dialogue throughout the film, but yet her character speaks volumes throughout the film. It's really interesting. She is more or less kind of the centerpiece of this film because she's tied so directly to all of the horror that happens in this film and all the tragedy that you you really feel and see the extent of how horrible these things are through her character. It's really interesting. She's almost kind of this barometer of this horror that's going on and the ramifications, the deep connections that she has through a lot of these people, through her family in this community, and then also the fallout of what she's going through. Pretty amazing. And there's a lot of scenes where she plays a very quiet role, but she's speaking volumes. And I think that that's really testimony to somebody who is a really great actress. I had never seen her before, but pretty amazing. Very, very, and again, a very complex role, a very complex character. And all of these characters kind of defy your expectations as to what, you know, and it gets away from the usual thing that you would see in a film that is dealing with essentially a film about that is a murder mystery film. This changes and goes in different ways of the way of the narrative of that tradition, and which I think is brilliant. And I feel like Scorsese could. He's the only person that could pull this off. It's something that is so complex. There's so many things in this film. It's a very dense story. There's a lot of pieces. The story itself is obviously very easy to understand, to comprehend it. How to comprehend this? How this actually happened is, you know, mind blowing. But the actual narrative is very easy to understand. But there's so many parts. There's so many pieces to this puzzle that it's very complex. And I definitely feel like this would be a movie that you would get a lot out of it and see other things and pick up on other uh, you know fragments that you might have missed in future viewings. This movie is very like again, Scorsese has done some very dark films, and he's notorious with how he shows violence in his films, and a lot of his films are very violent. But this film is a very dark film. It's a very dark film. It's a little bit darker and a little bit more dismal than I thought it was going to be. To a degree, it's kind of without sounding insensitive or being insensitive around the subject movie. It's kind of a downer. The whole movie is very dark. It's very dour. It's very dark, and it's kind of a downer the whole way through for most of the story. And to a degree, it's a little bit maybe unrelenting as far as the tone of the movie, because they set out to really. I feel like this film has gone. there were many different rewrites for the script, and they decided to tell the story in more or less its chronological order of the events that occurred in this story. And but again, it's so well done. The dialogue. There are scenes in this film that are where the dialogue is just incredible and it's riveting as all hell. And to me, that's where the suspense comes through. And so it was a truly an epic film. The other thing that is so weird, and I don't know, I think it was because of this particular theater. This movie is a very quiet movie. There is a lot of violence. It is a very dark film, but it's mostly on in this space where there are scenes of lots of dialogue and people sitting around talking about these various situations that are going on. And I found myself, there were times during the movie, especially in the beginning, there's this whole opening sequence with De Niro's character and DiCaprio's character. There's this whole long sequence of where they're talking in this room, and I was into it a lot, and I was like, this is really interesting. This is pretty fascinating. But at the same time, I was like, I can't fucking hear what the hell they're saying. Like, what the fuck is going on? And the other thing that was frustrating, Robbie Robertson did all of the music for this film. He passed away in August, of course, from the band. Scorsese's had a long relationship with Robert Robertson ever since he directed The Last Waltz. A legend in the music business. And he did all of the music for this film. And with the exception of a couple of louder sequences, you can't hear any of the music. It's super weird. I couldn't tell if there was music or not, or if it was actually music coming from the next theater. Because sometimes you get that spillover if the music is coming from another movie and it might be particularly loud, and you're in the theater and you're watching a quiet scene. Sometimes you'll get that bleed through. So I wasn't sure if it was that, and it kept happening. And there were certain sequences where the volume was good, and you could hear it, and there was loud. There were scenes where it was kind of a louder environment. But then it would always dial back down to where it'd be really quiet. And there were times where I just could not hear what the fuck was going on. And I didn't say anything, but I talked to Erin about it before. And I was like, was it me, or could you like barely hear what was going on at times? And I kept thinking, and she felt the same way. And I kept thinking, was this the fault of the theater where the sound system just wasn't good? Or was this intentional? And this was how the movie was put together. And I think what it was the sound in this particular theater was pretty shitty. Because there's a lot of scenes where there's a lot of dialogue, and I found myself almost every time I could make out most of what was being said, but a lot I feel like I probably missed. There were sequences where I found myself, I had to listen so hard that it was kind of painful. And because of that, it almost took me out of the movie. And it almost kind of ruined the experience. So I don't really know what the fuck that was about. And I'm curious about that. And I've seen reviews for this film a lot, and all of the reviews have been pretty spectacular, rightfully so. But I haven't seen anybody criticize or bring up the idea that the volume for a lot of these scenes is so goddamn quiet that you can't hear what's going on. So I kind of feel like it was that particular theater where the sound was not very good. It was in a smaller theater. It was very weird. It was very frustrating. And almost to where I was still totally invested in the movie, but it almost took me out of the movie where it's just like, I don't know if I could do this for 4 hours. If this is going to be like this the whole time, because I can't really hear what is being said, like what is going on here. And it's a funny thing because we were talking about it afterwards, and Christopher Nolan is a director that has gotten flack for that. For certain films of his, The Dark Knight Rises, Tenet, and then also I think it was even Oppenheimer, where there are scenes in his films where there's a lot of dialogue, and I remember reviewers talking about where they could not hear what was going on. They thought it was really tough and kind of frustrating. And it came out around that time that Christopher Nolan intentionally does this thing of where he will mess with the levels and bring them down to a low area. So the viewer, you have to kind of lean in and really, really pay attention. And he apparently does that intentionally in certain films and in certain scenes of where you really have to like totally lean into the film to kind of understand what's going on, which is like kind of weird and kind of stupid, but I guess I get it. And I was wondering, was that the case with how Scorsese wanted to do this film? Which I hope not, because this was bad. It was really bad. It was if that is how the film was shot and a premeditated thing that they decided to do, I couldn't sit through it again. I couldn't watch it again. I'm really eager to see this film on like Blu-ray or DVD and watch it at home and crank it up and watch it and see if that's the case, because it was tough. I mean, it was tough. And to do that for 3 hours, oof, it was almost painful. Aside from all of that stuff, which was very hard, it was an amazing film, and I highly, highly recommend it. It is a long film. Um, it's questionable, maybe a little too long, maybe a little bit too self indulgent with that, but still a sweeping movie. The ending for this film is spectacular. I don't want to give anything away. Kind of a love letter to films. That's what I feel like this movie is, to classic cinema. But this is Jason Dean. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.